Hello everyone, my name is Dhaval Shah and I'm a principal product manager at Sysdig, and today I want to talk about friction. Friction can be injurious to health. I want to share my perspective on product development and particularly focus on the part that friction plays at that. We as product managers spend a lot of time thinking about building products that would delight our customers, and friction plays a big part of that experience. Friction prevents us from building those delightful experiences for our users. I very vividly remember the first time I ordered my calculator in my college. I was very excited about it, and I waited for it to arrive for the longest time. And when it actually did, I wanted to open it and use it as soon as I can. Well, as you can see, the calculator was wrapped in a frustration-inducing plastic packaging. So as anyone would do, I tried to use my pair of scissors to try to open it. I wrangled with it for some time. That did not help. So I had to go old school, and I brought out my trusted cleaver knife. After wrangling for another 10 or 15 minutes, I was finally able to get to my calculator. Mission accomplished. Well, not so soon. Now, when I started to use my calculator, I realized how much friction was built into the product. Many of the buttons had multiple options, so I had to refer to a manual, try to understand how can I get to my trigonometry. And I would always get confused if C or CE would clear my last operation. And so this time, that was one of my first times I realized, why does there need to be so much friction built into the product? So what exactly is friction? In mechanics, friction is the force that opposes the motion of an object. But in product sense, we can define friction as anything that prevents a user from achieving their goal. In product friction, again, can be further broken down into two types: interaction friction and cognitive friction. So let's look at what interaction friction is. I like to think of interaction friction as anything that relates to all aspects of the UI and that prevents the user from achieving their objective. I want to share a very personal story. Recently, I had to purchase a new auto insurance policy. And this is how my experience went. And I could find a lot of interaction experience built into the provider's website. I had to go through different providers, and I had to click to get a quote. And once I clicked to get a quote, I needed to enter a bazillion amount of information, starting from my name, my contact information, my vehicle make, model, and usage, and all the information starting from my educational status to my marital status and SSN in between. I wasn't even sure how all this information was going to help the provider determine what level of insurance should they be giving me. So there was a lot of frustration and friction built into the process. And so as thinking about different providers, my friend suggested root insurance, and this made a lot of difference, and I could clearly see why the product managers and designers at root insurance thought about reducing the interaction friction. So buying the insurance at root insurance included just 2 steps. All I needed to do was download the app and scan my driver's license. From my driver's license, they were able to find all the information that was needed for them to give me with the quote. The second crucial thing that they wanted me to do was to go on a test drive. Go on a test drive, keep the app on the phone, and then they would figure out my driving pattern. They could see the way I was driving, the number of turns I was taking, and how much mileage I was driving in. After collecting this information, I was presented with a quote, and I could make the purchase right in the app. And one of the other crucial things that they delighted me was they actually contacted my previous auto insurance provider and canceled the policy for me. This made the experience very phenomenal for me. Again, I didn't really deal with a lot of interaction friction while using this application. Now that we know a little bit about interaction friction, how do we go about finding this interaction friction within our products? Usability studies is one of the most efficient ways of finding interaction friction within each of our products. When you see your users using your app, all the sources of friction will be visible that you might have missed in the first place while building your applications. There are also certain guidelines that you can use that can help you reduce this friction. Call to actions should be very clear. You should try to remove any unavoidable steps. And last but the most important thing is, you should try to do as much work as you could do on the behalf of the customer. When you follow these guidelines, I'm fairly certain you'll be able to reduce interaction friction to a degree within your product. Now that we've seen interaction friction, let's look at the next type, cognitive friction. How many of you have heard about Alan Cooper? Okay, few of us. He is known as the father of the UX designs, and he came up with the term cognitive friction. And I try to think in a simplified terms as cognitive friction is the amount of mental work that the user needs to do to get to their task. I'm sure many of you think about investments in your retirement account. I needed to reallocate my investments in my retirement account, and I use Vanguard for my investments. I consider myself to be very familiar with financial terms, and even for someone like me, it took me several hours to figure out my investment strategy. I needed to figure out what kind of mutual funds or ETFs that I need to invest in. And once I decided on the mutual fund, I then needed to decide whether it needs to be as part of the allocation should be domestic stocks or international stocks, and how much of that portfolio needs to be in stocks and bonds. When I think about someone who doesn't have any financial information, this is pretty much getting like a PhD to get your retirement investments. So why does someone need to think about that much when all they're trying to do is trying to figure out the investment strategy in their retirement account? I was trying to figure out who else has done this much more better, and then I came across Betterment. What Betterment does is, it asks me a few questions to try to determine my risk appetite. And once Betterment was able to figure out my risk appetite, it decided the investment strategy that best matched my risk appetite. And one of the other cool things that it did was it automatically reallocated the investments as my circumstances changed. For this, I didn't really have to think too much. I didn't really have to go through mental gymnastics to figure out my investment strategy. So this, again, is a very good example of how you can think about cognitive friction and how can you think about reducing within your products. What tool can you use to reduce cognitive friction? Usability journeys. Again, so once you map out all the user journeys within your product, can help you find cognitive friction. And one of the other things that you want to do in terms of reducing it is to remove any additional options that are not crucial to get the job done. Any additional options, this creates more mental work for the customer. So I started the talk with friction is injurious to health, but as with life, it's all about balances. So friction is not always injurious to health. We'll look at a few instances where friction is actually good for your application. Here what you see is Product Hunt. As soon as you, this is again, if you're not aware of Product Hunt, it's a review site. But when you sign up on Product Hunt, they don't immediately allow you to post on the platform. They make you go through a series of steps to make sure you are a human and not a robot, and then they allow you to post on the platform. And they make it very clear on the right-hand side on what benefits are you getting by going through these steps. So by doing this, Product Hunt is again improving the overall quality for everyone on the platform. So friction is not always bad. Friction can help improve quality. One last thing, friction can help avoid mistakes. What would you all do if the alarm just went off and if you knew a missile was coming in your direction? Well, this is what exactly happened in the state of Hawaii earlier this year. A state employee tried to use a UX pretty much similar to this, and so instead of clicking on the drill link, clicked on the actual alert link, and the alert was sent to the rest of the state. This created a lot of panic. Things like this could have been avoided if certain friction would have been built into the product to have appropriate checks and balances. So friction, again, we've seen a lot about interaction friction, cognitive friction, how friction could be good and how friction could be bad. So I hope when you all go back and look at your product through the lens of friction, you try to reduce the friction or not. And one of the quotes that has stuck with me for the longest time is, people ignore designs that ignore people. I use that as a guiding post anytime I'm starting to design or work on a new product. Thank you.